Thanks for clicking play on the latest edition of Iowa Revolution. My name is Spencer. He is Dr. Bob. Dr. Bob, good to see you.
Good to see you, Spencer.
First of all, the big news, we do have Pete Buttigieg coming later on in the show. He's in Cedar Rapids as we speak, or at least as we're recording, getting ready to speak to the Vote Vets rally tonight in downtown Cedar Rapids. So we got about 10 minutes to talk to Pete. Even had a chance to give him my top 5 Petes. So you'll want to make sure to stick around for that later on in the show. But first off, Dr. Bob, the biggest news in the state of Iowa is Rob Sand has announced that he will run for governor, of course, as a Democrat. He does have $8 million in his coffers right now. $7 million of that is from his family and extended family. And it is expected that we're going to be seeing some more Republicans put their name in the hat. Brenna Bird, Pat Grassley, now Randy Feenstra has explored now possibly getting into the governor's race. So those are just a few names. Also Mike Busolo, Republican from Ankeny. He's also kind of entertained running for governor. So first of all, just your thoughts on Rob Sand now officially in the race.
Well, it's something we've suspected would happen for some time, for years. In fact, you and I've talked about it. A lot of people, saw him as the likely candidate since he's the only elected official. I think he's a good man. I think he'll do a great job. Having the money is important. These races aren't going to be easy to win. I just think that, he's been, I think, very balanced in his auditor position. I really think that Kim Reynolds stripping that off of office of its power was, I don't know, something anti-democratic. I think that we needed that office to be a watchdog. Now, why wouldn't Kim Reynolds want a watchdog, right? So you can do things that you don't want anybody to know. And I just think
right. I mean, that's a question that answers itself. Yeah.
Yeah. So I think Rob's done a good job. He may get a challenger. I think somebody is telegraphed that they may run, and I don't think that's a bad thing. I think that it'll actually help him. I just worry about primaries now in the sense that they take up so much money, and that we just
there are diverging views on that, and I think there's probably merit to both of them. There's one side that says having a tough primary helps in terms of name recognition. Then you're going to have to spend money to get ads earlier on, so you might get that early bump. So there is that side of the coin. But then, as you said, that also makes you burn through some money that you're not going to have then when you get to the governor's, when you get to the general race.
Yeah, so we'll see. I'm forgetting the name of the candidate. I know that she's well respected, but I don't know. We'll see. I just think that, Rob stands a really good chance of winning, especially against some of the people that have come forward that, Brenna Bird is just cruel and vindictive. Feenstra just.
To me, it seems odd that Feenstra would even enter the race. He's got a comfy seat for as long as he wants to stay in the Congress. Laura Bellin did say to me off the air last night, but she said this on the air before when we were doing our Capitol Week show. But, that old saying of when they're handing out the pieces of the pie, that's when you grab your piece. We're probably not going to see an open governor's race for however long this new governor stays, in their seat. So I guess that is the other side of it is, hey, now is your chance for an open Republican primary for governor. Might as well see if you have a shot. So that's really the only, logic I can see in it.
Well, the thing too is that if you're in Congress, there's a whole lot of people in Congress that don't do very much work.
Right.
If you're a governor, you have to work.
Right. And he doesn't go out and speak to his constituents. He's never really debated Ryan Melton in their 2 races previously. They did have one private debate that apparently went so badly that they never actually scheduled a public debate. And that's another issue. He hasn't really had any kind of contested race. Even when he's ran, in that primary against Kevin Virgil, he only won like 60 to 40%. Nobody knew who the hell Kevin Virgil is. So,
Right.
It's not like to me, it seems strange that he would think that he would have a shot.
Yeah, and while you mentioned Ryan Melton, I'm just going to say I think he's positively courageous. I think he's a really good person. I think he really knows the district and knows what's knows how to listen. He goes everywhere. I've been in different kinds of things that, I was just at a meeting in Algona, and I was giving a talk in Algona to the um, Algona Democrats, and then next thing I know is I look around and he's in the audience. So he's just everywhere, and
Right.
I actually really admire him.
While we're on the topic of campaigns, just your quick thoughts on Sarah Trone Garriott versus Jennifer Converst in that race for the Democratic nomination that would go up against Zach Nunn if he decides to stay in that race.
Well, I think they're both very well qualified. I think they'd both be um, true representatives of the people. Again, this is one of those situations where I don't see the value of burning all that money in a primary. There's
Yeah,
no
I
real,
think these are candidates in terms of the Rob Sand candidacy. You would imagine that somebody would run certainly to his left because there are
right.
certainly a lot of, true blue Democrats that have problems with Rob Sand, for better or for worse. So I think that he will probably have somebody run to his left, but there doesn't seem to be much of a difference between Jennifer Converst and Sarah Trone Garriott.
No, I think Laura Bellin's gone over their records and sees there's not a big difference. I just think they'd both be good. I think Jennifer's done a good job in leadership. I've really admired Sarah's efforts to, try to help the refugees that were left stranded by the Trump Reynolds administration, already here, and having been promised, certain kinds of support, and then having that be pulled away. It's just more of the cruelty of the Trump Reynolds regimes, and it's sooner we get all the people associated with it out, the better.
Yeah, and the biggest thing is hopefully whoever wins the primary wins against Zach Nunn is is the biggest thing. So
Yeah,
we'll see
and
how that plays too.
Zach Nunn has, I hate to say this, but he doesn't have the courage to stand up for veterans, for Iowans, for farmers, for anybody. He's just another Trump toady. And
Yeah.
so yeah, he's just been cowardly.
Let's get into some talk here. This is from CNN. President Donald Trump has been personally involved in discussions inside the administration over potentially suspending habeas corpus, a legal procedure that allows people to challenge their detention in court. Two people familiar with the consideration told CNN. One of Trump's top aides, Stephen Miller, also looks like Nosferatu, confirmed publicly Friday that the administration was actively looking at suspending habeas corpus, adding that it depends on whether the courts do the right thing or not. Both the private discussions and Miller's public comments show this is under serious consideration inside the West Wing. While Trump has not explicitly mentioned habeas corpus in public, it's what he was referencing last month when he commented on steps he could take to combat nationwide injunctions against his actions on deportations, according to one of the people familiar with the talks. And Trump told reporters on April 30th there are ways to mitigate it, and there's some very strong ways. There's one way that's been used by three very highly respected presidents, but we hope we don't have to go that route. But there is one way used successfully by three presidents, all highly respected, and hopefully we don't have to go that way, but there are ways of mitigating it. It remains unclear whether this is something the administration will actually pursue, and experts say it will likely generate legal challenges. The White House declined to comment beyond Miller's statement.
Yeah, well, my only recollection of when that has happened before was during the Civil War and during World War II, and the detaining of Japanese American citizens, which is a stain on our history. And it's just, I don't know the other one, maybe you do, but it's just you are just swept away to some prison camp with no recourse, no, it's like you have no rights anymore. And so everybody should be afraid of this. But everybody always thinks that, oh, it's not going to apply to them, but then sooner or later a friend will be snapped up. And it's more creeping, it's well, not creeping even, it's galloping authoritarianism where they're just taking control of all institutions. And Pete has some things to say on this later on, Pete Buttigieg during our interview later, but everybody should be frightened. The thing I want to say again is our MAGA friends and relatives. I watch Fox News. I look at all the MAGA media, and they don't know this is happening.
Right.
They don't know anything that's happening. Everything is all unicorns and rainbows on Fox News,
By
except
the way,
they'll.
I've got the list of there's only been two declared by presidents that I can see, and this is Google AI, so trust this as much as you can throw it. But it was declared by Andrew Jackson in New Orleans during the War of 1812. As you mentioned,
1812.
it was also during the Civil War, of course, declared by President Abraham Lincoln. It was also declared by Governor Poindexter in Hawaii after Pearl Harbor, and then a few other instances of riots, Cambridge, Maryland. There was the Omaha race riot of 1919, and also during some natural disasters like the Chicago fire or the San Francisco earthquake. So just, I mean, literally in the, 250 years of the Republic, we've had a handful.
Well, and I was just thinking of instances by the president, and I didn't know that local authorities had that power to say that, to
Correct. I
tell.
did not know that. Yeah, because yeah, like I said, it was in specifically like in the Chicago fire. And I mean, in those instances, those are, natural or just, just disasters. So it would sort of make sense just in terms of safety to keep people away from those areas. But this is not for anybody's safety, of course, what they're talking
Right.
about. They're just talking about we want to lock people up or ship them off overseas and not have to worry about anybody looking over our shoulder.
Yeah.
And speaking of, let's get into this. Very much related to that story. This is from the Associated Press. Newark Mayor Ras Baraka was arrested on Friday at a federal immigration detention center where he had been protesting its opening this week and held in custody for several hours. Baraka was released shortly after 8 p.m. and after stepping out of an SUV with flashing emergency lights, told waiting supporters, quote, "The reality is this. I didn't do anything wrong." Baraka, a Democrat who is running to succeed term limited Governor Phil Murphy, has embraced the fight with the Trump administration over illegal immigration. He has aggressively pushed back against the construction and opening of the 1,000 bed detention center, arguing that it should not be allowed to open because of building permit issues. Linda Baraka, the mayor's wife, accused the federal government of targeting her husband. She said this, quote, "They didn't arrest anyone else. They didn't ask anyone else to leave. They wanted to make an example out of the mayor," she said, adding that she had not been allowed to see him. A crowd gathered to protest outside the building where Baraka was being held, with many chanting, "Let the mayor go." Witnesses said the arrest came after Baraka attempted to join three members of New Jersey congressional delegation that were there. When federal officials blocked his entry, a heated argument broke out, according to Viri Martinez, an activist with the New Jersey Alliance for Immigrant Justice. It continued even after Baraka returned to the public side of the gates. There was yelling and pushing, Martinez said. Then the officers swarmed Baraka. They threw one of the organizers to the ground. They put Baraka in handcuffs and put him in an unmarked car.
Yeah. I think this is terrible. I don't know exactly what happened. I watched some of the body cam imagery and it didn't look like he had done anything wrong to me. Um, but it's like this is also it's also reliant on basic human emotions and studying body language in the sense that, you know, that, well, I mean, for example, there was a time when I'm just going to say it. There was a runaway that was looking for shelter in our home. Okay. And so, well, I welcomed the runaway and my family welcomed the runaway. And then, of course, I called the sheriff's office to say, here's what's going on. This kid is here. He's safe.
Right.
Right. And he was fearful and he didn't want to see his family. And so uh, a young officer came in, somebody I'd known since they were a little boy, and they came in with their hands on their hips and it walked into my living room in what I interpreted as a threatening stance.
Right. Hand on his gun,
Yeah,
basically.
hand on his gun and looking around, and I understand he was looking for safety. I've known him since he was a little boy, and he came in and I interpreted it as a provocation. And if I wouldn't have known him, I would have said, "You're in my home.
Right.
Take your hand off your gun."
Yeah, I
And
called
so,
you just to let
yeah,
you know. Right.
that's right. And then a senior deputy came in, that's a dear friend, and he just walked in like, I'd invited him over for a beer. And I think it's the training that, their lives are at risk sometimes, but the mere existence of a stance, and if it's somebody that you don't know, and it's a threat. I don't know if you remember or not, but Ty Rushing was escorted out of not allowed into a, a Ron DeSantis event. Ty Rushing, now professor of journalism at the University of Iowa,
Right.
former Iowa starting line reporter, and I watched that video, and Ty handled it perfectly, but the way that everybody was standing, and it was a threat, it was a provocation, and they were looking for a reaction
Correct.
from, and
Yes.
Ty didn't give them a reaction. He asked
They
them
were
where
looking for any excuse to put handcuffs on him.
right, and I think
And
that's
Baraka gave, and in the police's mind, he gave them their permission to now put the handcuffs on him.
that's right.
And the
And so,
thing is, to me, the legality of what Baraka did is besides the point. We should be looking at the legality of what they're doing with this 1,000 bed immigrant camp.
exactly. And there, you know, there,
What are they doing there? And he's trying to get people to understand, hey, we need answers. I'm
well,
the mayor of this town, and I need to know who's in this building. I need to
well,
know
if they
who
don't
the
even have
ICE
the
agents
permits.
are. I need to exactly. They're doing this illegally
Yeah,
in his town, and they're locking him up.
right.
So
Yeah,
that's
well,
the
get
story to
used to
me.
it. Get used to it. They're going to continue to lock up Democrats. They're going to continue to lock up anybody that they think is that that Trump doesn't want. I mean, and this all fits in with that, with the habeas corpus discussion that we just had. He doesn't wouldn't have the right to challenge his, they could ship him off to El Salvador to a
Correct.
British prison.
Yeah, no right to a lawyer, no phone call. Like they said, his wife wasn't even allowed to see him in jail. How
Yeah,
messed up is that?
right. So it's more of galloping authoritarianism.
And like you said, I mean, part of that DeSantis thing, they wanted that to be public. They wanted a reaction from Ty, and I think it's the same situation here. They welcome these things. They want to publicly arrest mayors,
Well, there's also a racial element.
especially black mayors. I'm just going to say that.
Yeah, I was just going to say there's a racial element to it too. And I can speak from experience that I've been to lots of protests in the last, couple of months, and mostly white people, up to 2,500 people, and with no police presence. And I remember going to Black Lives Matter protests, heavy police presence. So every time there, was a potential for an interaction between police and any individual, I forget the statistics on that, but like whenever like 3% of all interactions with police, 3% of all interactions turn violent. And so the more police you have at an event, and my law officer buddies are going to be mad at me for saying this, but it's statistically a fact. The more police you have in an event, the greater the chance of a provocation.
Yeah,
And
police themselves are an escalation,
the
period.
existence of them. That's
And that's
correct.
for better or worse, by the way. But police showing up is an escalation.
Yes. And then at the same time, sometimes they're needed to protect us and keep the peace. And I've seen officers do a very good job, in particular at the Capitol. I've seen the Iowa State Patrol do a really good job with respect to letting a situation play out a little bit and see what happens, and then handle it responsibly. I'm not saying that happens in all instances with police, but it's a statistical probability that something is going to happen.
And it also squares police off against lawful citizens.
Right.
These people aren't criminals. They're not showing up. I mean, that's the thing. Eventually, sometimes that happens because a lot of that is the police are the escalation. Like we've
Well, and
talked
there was
before about the Chicago riots during the Democratic convention. The police started the riot.
Well, there was an altercation a couple of years ago at the Capitol where they tried to arrest somebody. The state patrol came in and just tried to arrest somebody, and everybody's watching it and they're saying, "Hey, why are you arresting this guy? Stop!" And so they were trying to arrest a guy, and the crowd's like, "What's going on?" And a trooper, who's a friend of mine, I said, "Why did that happen there?" They said, "Well, because he had an arrest warrant out." I said, "You know where the guy lives. You don't have to arrest him at the Capitol building amongst
Seriously.
a crowd of 500 people."
Right.
And
That's
so
idiotic.
that that arrest in that situation resulted in a fight.
Right.
Lots of bad stuff happened. Nobody was killed, fortunately, but they knew where the guy lived. Why would you not just go to where he lived instead of doing it publicly in front of hundreds of protesters at the Capitol? And this state patrolman didn't understand why I thought that was not a good idea.
That's embarrassingly dumb
Yeah.
to not understand that. Let's get into some Iowa because this is very interesting. This is from also the Associated Press. Pope Leo XIV laid out the vision of his papacy Saturday. By the way, I'm not Catholic. Dr. Bob is not Catholic. He identified artificial intelligence as one of the most critical matters facing humanity and vowing to continue with some of the core priorities of Pope Francis. Leo, the first American pope, told the cardinals that he was fully committed to the reforms of the Second Vatican Council, the 1960s meetings that modernized the church. He identified AI as one of the main issues facing humanity, saying it poses challenges to defending human dignity, justice, and labor. Leo referred to AI in explaining the choice of his name. His namesake, Pope Leo XIII, was pope from 1878 to 1903 and laid the foundation for modern Catholic social thought. He did so most famously with his 1891 encyclical Rerum Novarum, which addressed workers' rights and capitalism at the dawn of the industrial age. The late Pope criticized both laissez-faire capitalism and state-centric socialism, giving shape to a distinctly Catholic vein of economic teaching. In his remarks Sunday, Leo said he identified with his predecessor, quoting him, "In our own day, the Church offers everyone the treasury of its social teaching in response to another industrial revolution and to developments in the field of artificial intelligence that pose new challenges for the defense of human dignity, justice, and labor." Toward the end of his pontificate, Francis became increasingly vocal about the threats to humanity posed by AI and called for an international treaty to regulate it.
Well, he's absolutely right. I just think this was a very interesting pick. Um, I mean, we've talked about AI before, and there's lots of threats from it, and I think that it's good for him to get ahead of it. But I think one of the more interesting things of his rise is as our friend Matt Russell wrote in a recent piece at his Substack, Growing Rural Leaders, is that everything that we've seen, many of the big kinds of elections that we've seen, are statements against Trump. The Australian elections, repudiation of Trump. The Canadian election, not conservative, they're MAGA kind of Trump wannabe, was leading by 30 points and he ended up losing, because
Right.
Trump's so pissed off the Canadians. And now here, the appointment of Pope Leo is also a reaction to Trump and Trump's authoritarian, desires. And so it's really interesting. Trump could ignore a pope anywhere else. For an American pope, when there's a confrontation over Trump policies, J.D. Vance policies, and the pope speaks out,
And we
Trump's
know
going
that
to have
this
to
Pope is
pay
not
attention.
afraid to lock horns with JD Vance. He's called him wrong on Twitter before.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. So I'm looking forward to this and we'll see how it plays out. We'll see how diplomatic the Pope is. We'll see if he gets into everything, which would be a mistake, but the serious issues, I would guess that he's preparing now to address lots of issues that, with the atrocities of the Trump administration.
Well, this is especially in terms of calling for an international treaty to regulate it. That wasn't this Pope, that was the last Pope Francis, but I would imagine Pope Leo XIV would be on board with this as well.
Yeah.
They're looking for that international treaty to regulate artificial intelligence. And JD Vance, when he went on his European tour a couple months ago, told everybody that we should not have any regulation for artificial intelligence and this new technology, that would be, putting shackles on this technology. So so right there, the guy named himself Leo XIV because of artificial intelligence. He told us that.
Yeah.
And JD Vance is going across the world championing the progress that artificial intelligence could afford us.
Yeah. And it's just getting worse and worse. I've sort of stopped using it.
To me, it doesn't really do anything. Like here's a good example of AI that helps. Like we'll have a transcript of this Zoom meeting, and we'll be able to have that for people that just want to read along or whatever. And I was thinking last night even, but that's not even really artificial intelligence. We've had that sort of, transcribing technology for however long. But it's like when real artificial intelligence, all it does is steal from humans. It's just
Yeah.
theft.
Well, yeah, I think I mentioned to you that 52 of my at least 52 of my scholarly papers were used by Facebook,
Right.
and it was pirated. All the
Exactly.
information
And you
was
got no
pirated.
money, no recognition.
Nothing. I mean, and it's millions of scholars' work has been appropriated to train the Facebook AI model, no compensation whatsoever, and so it's a serious deal. Yeah, it's just
So yeah,
ripping
just
off.
imagine, I mean, you're just one of many, people that have written books, have taught that I'm sure that happens all the time in colleges and universities across the country of professors seeing their work spit back out at them from Chat GPT or one of these artificial intelligence chatbots.
Yeah, and I ran into a friend the other day who's worked at the Knoxville VA, as a counselor, psychologist, and
Right.
he was most of his work was just helping people, treating people, not doing the scholarly articles. But he said, "Hey, I did a couple of scholarly articles. Will you look them up for me?" And sure enough, it's stolen his scholarly work too. This is just a friend at the coffee shop.
Right. Yeah. So yeah, I mean, that's going on all across the world at an unbelievable scale. And yeah, they're just stealing money from us, stealing money, stealing knowledge. So that's just about it. By the way, I do have one last factoid of the week before we get to that interview with Pete Buttigieg. Of course, he is getting ready to speak in Cedar Rapids with Vote Vets tonight. Do you want to hear my factoid of the week, Dr. Bob? It is Pete Buttigieg related.
Oh, well, of course.
So Pete Buttigieg's father, Joseph, emigrated to the U.S. from Malta, and Buttigieg roughly translates to Lord of the Poultry.
Wow.
Yeah, Lord of the Poultry. And from Malta. So it's kind of a small world, but my cousin Ben and his family actually lived in Malta for a while. So maybe they
I
crossed
knew them.
paths with the Buttigieg clan at some point.
So would you rather be, and what was it called? The what of the
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 Lord of the Poultry. So
Lord
the
of the
the the Chicken
Poultry.
King, Turkey King.
So what would you like to be? Would you like to be the Lord of the Hogs, the Lord of the
Well, we
Frog?
do live in Iowa, so I think we could probably both get away with calling ourselves the Lord of the Hogs, and I actually kind of like that.
I'd rather
Um,
be Lord of the Cattle.
okay, fair enough. Lord of the
The Lord
Steers, maybe
of the what?
Steers.
Not the steer.
Steers.
Yeah, cattle. Or Lord, yeah, Lord of the Frogs would be okay too. That'd be fun.
Lord of the Flies is kind of scary.
Yeah, that'd be bad.
That would be bad.
Lord
So,
of the Eagles.
so anything else before we? Oh, that's a good one. Yeah, Lord of the Eagles. Anything else before we get to Pete Buttigieg?
Oh, lots to say. But it's more important for people to listen to Pete now.
For sure. Make sure you follow us on Substack. We're iowarevolution.substack.com. Dr. Bob also has two Substacks. He's got Cedar Creek Nature Notes, taking a walk in the woods with Dr. Bob, more nature related. And then, of course, a little bit more along the lines of what we do here on Iowa Revolution. He has Deep Midwest politics and culture. So make sure you follow there as well. And yeah, without further ado, here's us with Pete. We now welcome former Secretary of Transportation Pete Buttigieg to Iowa Revolution. Pete, thanks for joining the show.
Yeah.
So first of all, you are in Cedar Rapids right now. That's actually where I am originally from. I grew up in the Marion area, so welcome to Cedar Rapids. You were invited by Vote Vets to be at their town hall that's going to be taking place in downtown Cedar Rapids this evening at 5. So first of all, how's it back to be in Cedar Rapids again and participate in this event with Vote Vets?
It's great. It feels really good to be back in Iowa, obviously a state that I spent a lot of time in when I was running for president. But also, the last time I was in Cedar Rapids was when I was at the Department of Transportation and we launched a major investment to improve the airport. And so it felt really good stepping off the plane, seeing the progress. Looks like it's almost done in that great new terminal, and remembering why we worked so hard to make sure that those kinds of improvements could happen across the country. So excited to be back, and really excited to be spending time talking to fellow veterans, because I think with the country up against everything we're up against right now and the chaos and the disruption. Veterans, I think, are especially vulnerable to some of these things that are happening, but also I think a big part of the solution because veterans know how to solve tough problems and have a different relationship to just the whole concept of trust than I think anybody else does. And I think restoring trust in our country is one of the biggest things we have to do to get out of the political and societal mess that we're in.
Well, can you tell us, let's just start right there. Can you give like a mini 2 minute State of the Union,
Hmm.
address? Where are we? I mean, it seems like we're, in a terrible place, ushering in a right-wing Christian ethno state, lots of oppression of people, minorities of all kinds, people, tell me that I'm sort of overreacting. Where do you see our nation now?
I think in a lot of ways we may all still be underreacting. Look, I think of everything in terms of freedom, security, and democracy, and we are clearly less free, less secure, less democratic than we were just a few months ago. We're less free in a country where people can be stuffed into a van or detained based on an op-ed that they wrote or a protest they attended. We are less secure when the U.S. Secretary of Defense can randomly text classified information to the wrong guy on his phone. We are less democratic when a court of law orders the president to do something and he says no, which is basically what has happened. And the other thing I would say is that we're less prosperous economically, right? I mean, people are paying higher prices. The president's answer is, hey, maybe you get fewer toys this Christmas. What's the big deal? Even while he's getting ready to accept a jumbo jet as a gift from a foreign government. So, yeah, things are pretty messed up. But I also wouldn't be here if I didn't believe that we can come through this and change the direction of this country, not to the old status quo that we used to have, because that wasn't getting the job done either, but to one where all of the wealth and technological development that's happening in this country could actually be harnessed to make people better off instead of propelling the incredibly extreme inequality that we're seeing right now in this country.
So,
So
Pete,
what
you
do you
are
think the Democrat?
Episcopalian. Just
Oh,
wanted
go
to
ahead.
ask you a quick question about this. You're obviously not a spokesperson for the Episcopal Church, but you may have seen news that they have decided not to help resettle these new Afrikaner refugees, people from South African, white South Africans, who Donald Trump has now let in, the first refugees that he's let into the country. Just your thoughts on the Episcopalian Church declining to help these refugees.
Well, I'm not as familiar with that particular case, but I do know that when I go to church every Sunday, I hear a gospel of welcome and decency, and one that prioritizes the least among us and instructs us to sympathize with the oppressed. And that is not just part of the Christian faith that I belong to, but I think a consistent moral teaching across humanity. And the I don't think God belongs to a political party, but I do believe that we are called to live out our values at a time like this. And I'm going to keep talking about the implications. As has, by the way, I'm not a Catholic, but seeing how the new Pope has spoken about the stakes in immigration and the treatment of vulnerable people in our time, as well as the need for more peace in our time, reminds us that there are universal values at stake, and they matter, especially at a time when some of the most vulnerable and weak among us are being targeted by the most powerful people in the world.
What do you think is the Democrats' path forward?
Well, I think we need to be very focused in everyday life, both how everyday life is getting worse because this administration is increasing the prices you pay and diminishing the freedoms that you enjoy, but also how it could be better if we lived in a world where we made sure that more Americans were dealt into the wealth being created by technology, and if we had more and not less freedom, and it reestablished a woman's freedom to choose in this country and fully secured people's freedom to be who they are and to marry who they love, and so many other things that most Americans already agree with us on. But it's been hard to hear because of the noise in the information space that we're in. Look, we need to get back to basics as a party, is my view. And that means getting back to the basics of a policy message that reminds people why historically we have earned the support, especially of working Americans, union members, and also poor and low wealth Americans. And if we don't re-earn that political support, it calls into question why my party exists.
So based upon your experience, can you fill us in with what's wrong with oh the flight, flights, the air control system, and especially I don't know if I would want to fly into Newark.
The system's been under strain for a long time. It was a constant frustration when I was secretary. We faced technology issues, staffing issues. We fought through them and made them better than they were when I got there. But when I left, there was still more work to be done. I'm concerned, obviously, about layoffs and cuts to people who are working on some of the very technologies that are now causing all of these issues. But I'm not out there to be partisan about this either. My successor claims to want to improve this technology. He's put forward a plan that consists of a lot of the things that we were doing on my watch and claims that he can do them more quickly. If he can, I will be rooting for him to succeed because as a member of the traveling public, we all want the U.S. Department of Transportation to succeed.
Well, Spencer has a special segment that we always do, and he was hoping that you would do it with us.
I have top five Pete's. So I typically do top five lists to close out every show. So I've got my top five Pete's if you just got a minute to humor a little bit.
All right.
So outside looking at, we've got OLI, outside looking in. Do you remember the show Pete and Pete?
Oh, yeah.
Nickelodeon, of course you do. Okay, that's outside looking in. Here's number 5, Pete Sampras.
Okay.
Tennis legend.
Yeah.
Number 4, Pete Rose.
Yeah.
Probably would be higher without the cheating and the gambling.
Well,
number 3 is you.
One of the greats. Oh, God. Wow.
Yes.
I beat Pete Rose.
Yes, ahead of Pete Rose, Pete Buttigieg. Number 2 is Pete Rock. Not sure if you're familiar, rapper, producer, CL Smooth. Look him up, Google him. You'll like him. And number 1 is Pistol Pete Maravich. Pistol Pete, number 1, of course.
Gosh. All right. Well, that puts me in pretty great company. I'll take
You've got room to move up. So keep it going. Pete, it was really a pleasure to have you on. Have fun tonight in Cedar Rapids and hope to see you again.
Same here.
Thank you.
Great talking to you.